You're at a party, and someone drops "Sweet Child of Mine." Everyone else grooves casually, but your whole world lights up, heart racing, memories flooding, like time traveling back to innocence itself. Why does 80s music hit you harder, rewiring your thoughts in ways others can't touch? It's not just nostalgia. Science says 80s lovers think differently, more creatively, resiliently, even spiritually attuned. Stick around, because by the end, you'll decode your own brain's secret 80s superpower. If this sparks something, smash like, drop a comment on your favorite 80s jam, and subscribe for more mind-bending psych breakdowns. We first need to ask a deeper question. What makes 80s music sound the way it does? Because behind every synth chord, gated drum, echo-soaked vocal, and soaring guitar lead is something profoundly neurological. 80s music is built around a unique blend of melody-forward songwriting, emotional chord progressions, and repetition that stimulates memory pathways. Psychologists call this emotionally charged repetition, a musical structure that connects sound with autobiographical memory. Unlike many modern songs built for streaming algorithms, 80s music leaned heavily into big emotional choruses, long melodic phrasing, layered harmonies, and instrument-driven storytelling. This creates what neuroscientists refer to as prediction-reward cycles. Your brain anticipates the chorus, feels tension build, then experiences a dopamine release when it finally arrives. For people wired to respond strongly to music, especially those high in openness, emotional awareness, or nostalgia sensitivity, this style of music doesn't just sound good, it feels meaningful. It becomes a place where emotion, identity, and memory overlap, which is why people who deeply love 80s music often have stronger reflective and introspective thinking patterns. They don't just hear the song, they live inside it. Psychologists describe nostalgia not as living in the past, but as a form of emotional time travel that strengthens identity. When someone deeply connects with 80s music, they often possess what researchers call autobiographical memory attachment, meaning music acts like a key that unlocks emotional archives inside the mind. Even listeners who weren't alive in the 80s experience this effect. Because nostalgia is not only tied to personal memories, it is also tied to imagined eras, meaning we emotionally bond with cultural stories, visuals, and aesthetics from periods we never lived in. For 80s music lovers, this creates stronger reflective thinking patterns, deeper emotional empathy towards past experiences, and a longing for authenticity, simplicity, or real-world connection. Psychologists say people who frequently access nostalgic states often develop more resilient self-concepts because revisiting meaningful emotional experiences reinforces identity structure. In simpler terms, 80s music lovers tend to think in narratives. They see life not as random events, but as meaningful chapters, and music becomes the soundtrack that gives those chapters emotional continuity. Another psychological dimension emerges when we study the sound design of 80s music. The era introduced expanding creative soundscapes, early digital synthesizers, analog warmth, atmospheric reverb, and experimental drum textures. Instead of grounding the listener in realism, the music often creates cinematic emotional worlds. Psychologists associate this with transportative cognition, the ability to mentally step into imagined worlds. People who love 80s music often score higher in traits like imagination, abstraction, daydream thinking, creative visualization, and emotional imagination. Because the music doesn't just describe feelings, it paints them. This isn't escapism, it's symbolic thinking, the same mental processing artists, writers, and deep thinkers frequently use. In fact, psychological studies link music-evoked imagery with stronger storytelling intelligence, enhanced creative problem-solving, and more reflective emotional awareness. Meaning, many people drawn to 80s music naturally think in pictures, moods, metaphors, and emotional atmospheres. They don't simply process reality, they reinterpret it. Most 80s music wasn't afraid to explore vulnerability, heartbreak, longing, wonder, hope, grief, or existential loneliness. Instead of masking emotion behind irony or digital perfection, it expressed feelings directly and dramatically. People who resonate deeply with this kind of music often demonstrate heightened emotional awareness, stronger empathy response, and deep introspective sensitivity. Psychologists call this high affective attunement, meaning the brain responds intensely to emotional signals. That's why an 80s ballad can feel overwhelming, cathartic, or healing, especially for individuals who internalize emotion instead of expressing it verbally. For these listeners, music becomes emotional language, a bridge between what they feel and what they struggle to express. Rather than avoiding feelings, they process them through melody, which is why many 80s music lovers are not just nostalgic, they are emotionally reflective, sometimes deeply philosophical, and often highly resilient after emotional disruption. Even when 80s songs explored darkness, they rarely surrendered to hopelessness. The melodies carried forward momentum, the choruses lifted, the sound carried a sense of motion, like running toward something rather than away from it. Psychologists describe this as optimistic emotional framing, pairing hardship with hope. Listeners who connect deeply with this pattern often develop perseverance thinking, meaning-oriented resilience, and emotional recovery strategies. Because the music emotionally trains the brain to say, yes, life is hard, but we move forward. And that mindset shapes behavior. It doesn't mean 80s music lovers are always cheerful. It means they intuitively seek light inside emotional struggle. And that creates a unique psychological profile. Sentimental but strong, nostalgic but forward-moving, reflective but resilient. Not every 80s music lover fits one personality mold, but many display an interesting pattern. They often enjoy music privately, deeply, immersively. Psychologists link this with internal processing orientation, meaning thoughts are shaped internally before being expressed outwardly. These listeners may think more before speaking, prefer meaningful conversations, process emotions introspectively, and experience life through inner narratives. Music becomes a companion, not background noise. It becomes a mirror reflecting inner worlds back to the listener. And because 80s music leans emotional, cinematic, and story-driven, it aligns naturally with people who build rich inner landscapes inside their minds. People who don't just exist in the world, they experience it deeply. At its core, loving 80s music isn't just about sound, it's about worldview. People drawn to this era tend to perceive life as poetic, meaningful, symbolic, and emotionally layered. They see beauty in melancholy, strength in vulnerability, magic in memory. Psychologists describe this trait as aesthetic sensitivity, the ability to emotionally respond to art, beauty, nostalgia, and symbolic meaning. Where others see a song, they see a moment, a feeling, a snapshot of existence preserved in sound. And that shapes how they think, love, remember, create, and reflect on the world. So why do people who love 80s music think differently? Because 80s music isn't just entertainment, it's emotional architecture. It builds meaning across memory, imagination, identity, and resilience, shaping a way of thinking that is creative, nostalgic, empathetic, introspective, resilient, and deeply human. And if 80s music speaks to you, it's not just because you like the sound. It might be because your mind is wired to feel deeply, vividly, beautifully, in ways most people overlook. If you enjoyed this deep dive into psychology and music, don't forget to like the video, comment your favorite 80s song or memory, and subscribe so you don't miss future explorations into the human mind. Thanks for watching.